Okay, so for the odds of the Unit 2 review, first one is done by factoring. So just a reminder, you want what multiplies to 25, and the outers and inners must add to negative 20. So 4x squared, it could be 4x and 1x, or it could be 2 and 2. I usually start with the least extreme, 2 and 2. 25 is 5 and 5. Let's see, outers, inners, I get a 10x, which will add to negative 20 if I make those both negative. And I do want to confirm that if I make them both negative, they will multiply to a positive 25. Once I know I have it factored correctly, this is where I can tee it off, say 2x minus 5 equals 0, 2x minus 5 equals 0, x is 5 halves, 5 halves. So basically our answer is 5 halves. It does occur twice. That's called a double root. Next one, square root method. That's where we square root. Square rooting it undoes the square, so we get 2x minus 3. Remember, when you square root in an equation, you need plus or minus. So you need plus or minus radical 5, then add the 3. Standard form, the 3 goes in front, so 3 plus or minus radical 5. Divide by 2. X is 3 plus or minus radical 5 over 2. Completing the square, we group the x squared and the x, move the constant over. Then you're going to take half of the b, half of negative 4 is a negative 2, square it, which is positive 4. That is what you're going to add to both sides. So you're going to add 4. Then the left-hand side can be written as a binomial squared. The right-hand side you simplify. What always goes in here is half the b. So half of negative 4, negative 2. Now it follows just like the last problem. You're going to square root to undo the square. Equals plus or minus radical 7. And then you move the 2 over, so it's 2 plus or minus radical 7. Quadratic formula. Okay, so you have to know it's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So sometimes it helps people to identify, like a is 3, b is 4, c is negative 1 before you start the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared. 4 squared, 16, minus 4ac all over 2a, which is 6. This will be 16 plus 12, because negative, negative. So that's 28. Break down the radical. This breaks to square root of 4, square root of 7, so that's 2 radical 7. And then finally, when you get to that last step, you can take a 2 out of here, 2 out of here, 2 out of here. You have to take it out of all three. If you can't take it out of all three, then you can't simplify. So it's -2 plus or minus radical 7 over 3. Sketching graphically is using the graphing calculator. So you would need to calculate the zeros from the graphing calculator. 1.09, 3.91 would be your zeros. So this crosses a little bit to the right of 1 and almost to 4, 3.91. So you have a parabola, looks like this. So it's asking where it equals 0, so those are the zeros. Okay, solve the following inequalities algebraically. All right, so the first one, it's not an inequality degree 2 or higher. It's not a fraction with a variable in the denominator. So we would just solve this normally where we would multiply by 4 to get rid of the 4 in the denominator. Then add the 5. Divide by 3. X is less than or equal to 1/3. It says to express your answers in interval notation. Sometimes it helps people to, visualize this on the number line. So less than or equal to 1/3 would look like that. So in interval notation, it's -infinity up to 1/3. Hard bracket on the 1/3. So, I'm not partitioning the number line. I'm just viewing that on the number line. Now in 13, where I have an inequality degree 2 or higher, it's a degree 3 polynomial. I have to move the 20x over, factor out an x, oops, 10 and 2, minus 10 plus 2 will add to -8. It'll multiply to -20. Then I will go to my number line. I need -2, I need 0, and I need 10. I need whatever makes those 0. And since it's equal to 0, this is where they equal 0. So I'm going to color those in. I'm going to put my factors, my x minus 10, my x plus 2 down, and I'm going to partition the number line. So I pick a number to the left of 2. Let's say I put -3. So left of -2, -3, that's negative. -3 in there is negative. -3 in there is negative. 3 negatives give me a negative. If I pick in between -2 and 0, I'd pick -1. That would be negative. That would be negative. -1 plus 2 is positive. Overall, that's positive. In between 0 and 10, I'd pick maybe 1. So 1 in for x would make it positive. 1 in for x minus 10 would make that negative. 1 plus 2, 3, that's positive. Overall, that's a negative. A positive times a negative times a positive is negative. And then 11 would be positive, so I'm picking to the right of 10, which is 11. Okay. Now, greater than 0 means I want where the positives are. So my answer would be hard bracket -2 to 0, then 10 to infinity. solve each of the following equations algebraically. The 4x plus 1 equals 3. 4x plus 1 equals negative 3. Um, 4x equals, let's see, minus 1, so that's 2. X is a half. 4x equals negative 4, which means x equals negative 1. Those are your two answers. So remember, this thing could be 3, and then the absolute value of 3 would be 3. Or if this thing inside the absolute value is negative 3, we would still get 3. So that's why we're taking that and setting it equal to 3. And we're also setting it equal to negative 3 because it could be either one. Now with the inequalities, we isolate the inequality. So I would subtract the 2. Now, if it's greater than, this is where we set what's inside greater than 9, and then what's inside less than a negative 9. So we flip the inequality when we negate the right-hand side. And then you solve. Minus 3, negative 6y is greater than 6. Divide by negative 6. Remember, you have to flip the inequality sign when you divide by a negative. And that would be that would be a negative 1. Y is less than negative 1. Divide by the negative 6. Flip the inequality sign. Y is greater than 2. Again, if you want to put your answers in interval notation, or if you're asked to, sometimes it helps people to visualize it on a number line. We're saying less than negative 1, but greater than 2. So that'd be negative infinity to negative 1, 2 to infinity. Okay, fractional equations. Let's see, we're going to have to factor the denominators. Okay, and so then we have to multiply through by the least common denominator. I'm going to give myself some room here. Okay, so x plus 1, x plus 2 would be the least common denominator. So every fraction is going to get x plus 1, x plus 2. This fraction is going to get x plus 1, x plus 2. Same thing here, x plus 1, x plus 2. So if we're multiplying each of these by that, then here the x and the x plus 2 cancel with the x and the x plus 2 in the bottom. So we just have x, I'll write it down here. We have x plus 1 times x plus 1 there, which we're going to FOIL. Minus, now x plus 1, those cancel. So minus, we have to minus the entire x plus 4 times x plus 2. All right, here the x plus 2, x plus 1 cancels, so I just have a negative 3x. Okay, So I can FOIL. This is x squared plus 2x plus 1 when I FOIL. Here, if I FOIL, it's x squared. Outers and inners would give me 6x. Last give me plus 8. If you want to take a minute, distribute that through. Okay, so those cancel. 2x minus 6x will be a negative 4x. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. And then I can add the 4x. Negative 7 equals x. Now, remember, in the rational equations, you're only going to check to see if it makes the denominator 0. So the only thing I would reject here is if x was 0, negative 1, or negative 2, because those are what would make my denominator 0. It's none of those, so I can keep that answer. So you don't have to check it in the entire problem. You certainly could. All right. Solving those graphically, I would have to, well, I can show you. So you would calculate the zeros off of the calculator. So when you calculate zeros, you would get, one of them would be negative 0.37. The other one's approximately 1.37. So the way this looks, negative 0.37, so maybe right about there. And then 1.37, maybe right about there. You have this parabola. So here is where the graph is positive, greater than 0, because notice the graph is above the x-axis. In here is where it dips below. And then here again, it's above. So since we're looking for where the graph is greater than 0, remember, we're putting this in our calculator for y. So we're looking where is y greater than 0. My y's are greater than 0 when it's above the x-axis. So, so we're going to go negative infinity to negative 0.37, and then 1.37 to infinity. That would be my answer. Radical equations. Okay, so remember, this is where you square both sides. Squaring both sides is going to undo the radical on the left. It is not going to undo the radical on the right, because we're going to have radical x plus 2 times a radical x plus 2 plus 2. Firsts give me x plus 2. Outers and inners give me a 4 radical x plus 2, because a 2 radical x plus 2 plus a 2 radical x plus 2 is a 4 radical x plus 2. Last, give me plus 4. Okay, so we have x plus 6 plus 4 radical x plus 2. We are going to then minus x minus 6. So that is x minus 3 equals 4 radical x plus 2. Now, I could divide by the 4, but I don't want to, because then I'm going to get fractions. So I would just square here to get rid of the radical. So if I square on one side of the equation, I have to square on the other. So this would be x squared minus 6x plus 9. That's foiling that. Here, 4 squared is 16 times the radical squared is the thing under the radical, right? Now, the reason I said times is because that's what 4 radical x plus 2 means. It means 4 times. So it stays times, stays multiplication. Distribute the 16, move everything to one side. And then we're ready to factor. 23 and 1. I need minus 23 plus 1, so that it adds to negative 22, multiplies to negative 23. X is going to equal 23 here. X is going to equal negative 1 there. Now, with these, remember you have to do a check to make sure there's not something called an extraneous root. So 23 will work. I'm going to show you that negative 1 does not work. So it'd be square root of what? 2 times 1 plus 3. We're checking, does that equal square root of, or I'm sorry, 2 times negative 1. 2 times negative 1 plus 3. Negative 1 plus 2 under the radical, and then a plus 2. So I'm plugging negative 1 into the original equation. So that is square root of 1, which is 1. This is square root of 1 plus 2. So that's 1 plus 2, which is 3. So 1 does not equal 3. That does not work. All right, and then we have 25. So it says, an object is thrown from the top of a building 1,280 feet tall. So that is S sub 0. That is our starting height with an initial velocity. So V sub 0 is 32 feet per second. Write an equation to represent the distance of the object from the ground after t seconds. Okay, so remember, we use the formula S of t equals negative 16t squared plus V sub 0 t plus S sub 0. So what A would look like is S of t equals negative 16t squared plus 32t plus 1280. So that's the answer for A. What is the height of the object after 4 seconds? This you could go to table, find y value when x equals 4, right? So when we put this in our calculator, we're going to put in negative 16x squared plus 32x plus 1280 equals our y sub 1. So x becomes the time and y is the height of the projectile. So if you find the y value when x is 4, then that is your answer, which you could see from the answer key was 11. This is 1152 feet. So the answer for B is 1152. For C, D, you have to calculate maximum. And for E, you're going to calculate the 0 where it hits the ground. So I'm just trying to give you some explanation of what you do there. If you need help pressing buttons on the calculator, then you can let me know during class time. Otherwise, and to check what the actual answers are, check the answer key to the review packet. Okay, that's it for the odds.